Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. As you can see, I've got a little watermelon lemonade sparkling water right now. Y'all just hang on tight. I feel like this is gonna be a very chaotic video and I'm sorry. I'm currently trying to make myself lunch. I have a timer going for it. I'm trying to review this book. I'm trying to get some stuff done. If my thoughts are scattered, that's why. So today's video is going to be a small review about Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. Now this is an arc that I was able to get thanks to Bookish First. I read a couple pages of the first chapter and then I wrote a little blurb of my first impressions, and when you write your first impressions you're entered to win a copy of this, and they ended up picking me as one of the people that got to receive an arc early. So I got to receive this arc, I believe in July. I was able to read it early, which was really awesome and really cool. And this comes out September 28th, so I wanted to go ahead and get this review up for you guys so that you know if you're interested in it before the book comes out. So this is this author's debut book. And I'll flip to the back. This is the author in the back. It says that she's an author of speculative works and a lover of monsters and myths. So first off, let me tell you what this book is about in the synopsis. Basically, this story follows two characters, but the setup for this book is that they're living in this city, La Casa, where magic is no longer in existence, or there's no such thing as magic. Except for one of our main characters, Coffee, who realizes she has this power inside of her and has to hide it because if it was discovered, it could cost her her life. And with that, she is indentured to the Night Zoo, which is a part of the book where she has to pay off this debt essentially by working in this place called the Night Zoo. But then something kind of goes wrong and she has to go on this journey to rectify it. And the second main character of the story, Econ, he is trying to become a son of a six, which is a warrior, an elite warrior. It has to do with his family legacy as well. But on the night of his final rites, he encounters a Shaitani, which is a vicious monster that's been plaguing this city. And he also runs into other main character, Coffee, who seems to have some sort of influence or power to chase this beast away. And so through this meeting and skirmish, Coffee inadvertently saves Econ's life. But because of the situation that they find themselves in, they're both kind of put in positions where they have to prove themselves or rectify a situation. And so they both believe they have to redeem themselves. And they believe the way they can do that is by hunting down the Shaitani and bringing it back or killing it to save their city and kind of regain this confidence in the positions they would like, or canceling their debt. And they both kind of decided on this plan, and they end up making kind of a tentative alliance even though they're from different worlds. And they're going into the greater jungle, which is just wrought with danger and scary stuff. And it says the hunt begins. But it quickly becomes unclear if they are the hunters or the hunted. And so even on the front cover, the cover's really pretty, and I hope, I obviously don't have a finished copy, but I hope it's gonna be playing this up a lot because I think the cover is beautiful, and at the top it says the hunt begins. And obviously if you're looking at this, there's really cool chapter art or section art. You know how it's how some books are split into sections, it's like that. Obviously there's no map because that's going to be in the finished copy, but through each section, part 1, part 2, part 3, whatever it is, it looks like this, which is super pretty. So that's kind of the synopsis. I'm going to kind of run through my thoughts on this, but I'm also going to be pretty vague because this book isn't out yet, so I want to give you a review and kind of my thoughts. I don't want to spoil anything. However, because, this book has not come out yet, I don't want to be the person that spoils that for you. So I will tell you right off the bat, I did like this book. I think for a debut novel, she did a great job. I love how things are more African inspired. Those elements are really cool to see, even when they're just talking about their hair or what they're wearing or the things that they do. All of that was really cool and really immersive, even to the point where they're at one point they talk about having a gourd to drink water out of, and just all of the elements of that coming together I thought were done really well and really painted a picture in your mind for you, which I feel sometimes that's hard to do. So I think those elements were great. And again, for a debut novel, I think she did an excellent job. I think her story is pretty cool. I think the premise is really interesting. And I don't know, I'm assuming there's going to be a book 2. I don't know if this is going to be a series or a duology or what that's going to look like at this moment, but it is kind of being set up for a second book. As I mentioned in the synopsis, there are two main characters you follow, Coffee and Econ. And Coffee is a 16-year-old girl, and I believe Econ is a 17-year-old guy. And I don't know if tribes is the right word. I don't think it is, but basically they come from two different peoples. and one of those people is really looked down upon, and the other is kind of highly esteemed. And Coffee comes from a more poor situation, and she and her mother are paying off a debt, whereas Econ is coming from a more affluent situation where he's studying in the temple to be this elite warrior, and he gets more education opportunities, and he gets like good food and education and things like that, whereas Coffee is struggling daily with her mom. When you go into the jungle aspects, the jungle was really entertaining and really interesting and kind of horrifying and scary. It was kind of the jungle and the creatures within were kind of a character in and of itself, and that was really cool. And I really enjoy things like that when they're going to a jungle or forest and it's kind of dark and there's creatures and just different things like that. I love that aesthetic, so that was really fun. There's also, it talks about the night zoo, which is really fun, and I'm kind of sad because, not to spoil anything, but it's definitely in the book, but it's more towards the beginning of the book and doesn't play a bigger role later on, obviously because they go into the jungle. But the night zoo was one of my favorite parts of this book because of all of the different animals and creatures it talks about. It was really cool and really creative. I really enjoyed that. Overall, I thought the story was really good. One thing I do want to say though is when you read, so like if you read the back of the book or you read a synopsis of this book, when I read a synopsis or when I'm reading the back of the book, I don't expect to get a lot of information about what the story's about. I expect to get like enough for me to be interested or not interested on the premise, but I don't expect it to take me a long time to get past the synopsis. And something this author did, I think it was intentional. I think she tried to build a lot of backstory and world building for each of the two main characters and the world itself. And there's also like a third perspective. That one's kind of sprinkled in intermittently, so it's not like you learn more about that later, but it's one perspective that's much less than the other two perspectives. So, you know, the author's trying to build up all of this and build up the backstories of these two characters and the world because this is a new book, it's a debut novel, but it took like 220 pages, so 200-ish pages, to get through the synopsis and into the rest of the story. And while maybe that's not normally an issue for anyone or for me, I just felt like because I already knew the steps of what was going to happen for those 200 pages, it felt kind of slow to me. And I don't really know how to describe it because what's happening in the book is not slow necessarily. Like there's things happening, there's high stakes, there's things that are going wrong, stuff like that. But I think because I knew the outline of where we were going and that we were going to be going to the jungle, and it took like 200 pages to get to this point, I think I lost a lot of interest in that part because I knew what was going to happen, I guess. And I just feel like it should not take necessarily 200 pages to get through your synopsis. Again, this may just be me and this may just be a random qualm I have, and maybe I was just in a bad mindset when I started reading this book, because that can happen, but to me it just drug on a little bit too long in the beginning. But it wasn't boring. I don't want to sit here and tell you that it was like slow and boring, because it's not. But I guess I just expected all of that to take place in fewer pages rather than 200. Oh, and by the way, this is a little bit of a chunky book. So this is 474 pages. So 200 of those are the synopsis. But once you get through that and you've kind of like seen these characters built and the world a little bit built up, and you kind of sort of understand what's going on, and you get to the jungle portion was really cool and really interesting to me, and I wanted to read more and was reading faster when I got to that point. It just took me a while to get into it. Like I mentioned before, the night zoo was one of my favorite parts of this book, and the greater jungle was also super interesting, but horrifying. There was literally, I'm not going to tell you obviously what happens in the jungle because it's much farther in the book, but when I tell you there was a part where I got full body shivers because of something that really upset and like disturbed me, I mean it. Like I went bleh, and like had to put the book down because it like really disturbed me. And I'm not saying that so you shy away from this book, because I think you'd be fine. But just how much it got in my head, the way she was writing it, that's what happened. Like there was a physical response to it, which was hard to do, not pleasant to experience, but cool that she could do that with her writing. So yeah, the Greater Jungle and the Night Zoo and the magic that is mentioned in this book, the way the magic is performed and the high stakes of the magic, like how much you use and consume and how that affects you, I really liked those aspects. I liked that it's not just like no consequences with the magic. I liked that she did that. All of those elements were really interesting, and the underlying plot was also good. I think there were times here and there when I didn't really understand where the plot was gonna go. Not like I couldn't guess where it was gonna go, but just like, I wasn't sure what the end game was. I knew like the end game going in and figured it would change and wasn't really sure how it was gonna come about in the end. Had some ideas, but just kind of didn't have a lot of expectations, was just trying to see where it was going. And I mentioned this with the like synopsis and reading the first 200 pages. There were parts of this book that lost interest for me. However, there were others that were very gripping for me. And I felt like because of how I felt in the first portion of the book, it was harder for me to want to continue, even when there were parts that really gripped me and I really wanted to see how it ended. I feel like because I had that bad start, that it kind of affected my lens through the rest of the book. Which is not the book's fault, and I think it was more my mindset and going into it and kind of like, I don't want to say forcing myself to read it, but like I wanted to read this, get it finished, get a review up before the book came out, because that was the point of me getting an ARC. And I was picking it up when I wasn't really in the mood to pick it up, but I did it anyway. And I'm glad that I read this book. I do think it's a good book. I don't want to give people the wrong impression that I like hated this book, because I didn't. But I think my mindset in reading this book was not where it should have been, and that could have affected it. And again, through all of this, there were parts that lost interest for me or that were slow to me. But this book's pacing, I would not say is slow at all. It just took a bit for it to get going. Once it did get going, I think you're thrown into the problems they're facing and the different things they're navigating, and you're not sure how they're going to get through it. And you're not sure how this is all going to come about, and it makes the statement like they're not sure if they're the hunters or the hunted, and you're trying to figure that out as they're going, and all of that was really cool. And it mentions the Shaitani, that's the like monstrous creature. It was cool to see all of the different creatures and elements in the jungle and how it played out later. I would say I'm not a huge fan of the ending, but the ending kind of makes sense. And there's definitely parts of that book where you're like, no, why did you do that? That kind of like upset you, that like push the plot forward and make you care about the characters. There is a hint of romance, so just be aware of that. If you like really don't like romance, there is a hint of it. I'm not going to spoil anything about that. There's some like sinister underlying tones with humanity that I thought would come out, but not the way it came out. And I thought that was done pretty well, and also in a horrifying way in the twist of the book. And I think you do find yourself rooting for these characters and wanting them to have a good ending and wanting them to have this good victory and also wanting them to grow as characters. There were parts of this book that were really funny also. I like the dialogue between especially the two main characters. There are some characters that are more involved in the story than others, like depending on what part you want. I'm curious to see how she's going to continue. Again, I'm assuming there's going to be a second book. Let me look actually. Okay, yeah, so it doesn't say if there's going to be a second book or not, but I believe that she's setting it up for there to be a second book. So I would be curious to see how she continues the story and the different elements that were kind of hinted at or just now starting to explore, how she would build upon those in a later book. Because I think it could get really interesting and really cool really quickly. With the entities of this world tying in and becoming a bigger role, I think that would be really cool. Obviously, there's a kind of a big cliffhanger at the end, and we don't know how that's going to be resolved yet. But overall, I thought this book was a really fun ride. I think the author had a way of writing that really immersed you into this world. Even with like your senses, like I feel like I could see the things, sometimes hear the things, smell the things. I think she did an excellent job at that. I'm really interested to see what this author continues to come out with and write. I did give this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think it was close to a 4, but again, because of my weird issues with the beginning and how I felt about it, I felt it was fair to do it a 3.5, not just a 3. So I did really like this. I will probably buy a finished copy of this. So I did enjoy it. I feel like this whole thing sounds like I didn't enjoy it, but I did. I also feel like I'm trying to be pretty vague about a lot of this because I don't want to spoil anything for this book. I think if you really like African-inspired stories, or stories where you're getting to go into a jungle and you experience a lot of different creatures and sinister elements, I think you would really like this book. I know I've mentioned that there's magic in this, and I haven't touched on the magic a lot because I'm trying not to spoil anything, but basically it's like a magic that you can pull from the world around you, and it kind of comes into your body, and there's different risks and dangers with that. And in this book, again, they're starting off where they're saying magic doesn't exist, and she has to hide her magic from people or there will be dangerous consequences. So yeah, I did really like this book. I definitely think if the premise sounds interesting to you that you should grab it and read it. It's coming out September 28th, so you don't have to wait that long for it. And I think this author is going to be like one to watch and one to follow to see what else she comes out with, because I think she's going to be really good. And I like what she's bringing to the table so far. Please let me know what you think of the premise of this book. If you're curious about reading it, if you plan on reading it, if you're not sure about it, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and caffeinated. Bye.